So throughout the year, we do a lot of development with any individual organization. And then, where possible, we combine those developments into a single software edition that we make available. And for those of you that are in the hosted environment, it's pretty easy for us to change it. It's on our server. But for those of you that have it located on your internal servers, you may need to talk with your IT people to get an update of it. So Data Harmony is 15 modules with some extensions, and they include the admin module, the author submission system, the semantic fingerprinting, the author and name disambiguation, inline tagging, metadata extractor, MAI, the MAI batch GUI, MAI Chem, Ontology Master, Thesaurus Master, Search Harmony, and the SharePoint integration, as well as WebStart. So those are kind of the individual modules that we maintain, and we document and think of them individually. And of course, SIS. Don't want to forget that. So the author submission module is something where an author submits an article, and based on that article, MAI returns a suggested list of terms from the thesaurus that the author can choose, add to, subtract, or just accept as they are. We have rather found that authors tend to have a rather inflated idea of what their paper is about compared to a professional indexer, but be that as it may, for initial input, it's pretty handy to just have them get indexing. And a number of you have this author submission module. This example is the AACR one. And at AACR, they use it at 2 different times. One for the manuscripts as submitted in raw form, and then when the manuscript is actually accepted, the editors review the indexing and add to it. So it's in their case, a 2-step process, and it gives them the potential to keep track of what was submitted and what was accepted, so that they know kind of by topical area what they're keeping and tossing out. In author disambiguation, we build a data file of author names, as I mentioned earlier. We include the first name, second name, surname, and any other names they want to supply to us. We keep a list of all the DOIs that they publish. We put where they were in the author listing, if they were the first author, 5th author, or whatever. And we keep keywords, the taxonomy terms for all those DOIs. We keep a link to all of their affiliations that they publish under. We keep the geographic location as detailed as we can find it. And then we have a list of their co-authors as inferred by the DOIs, and so forth. So we have a pretty robust file that can be used in lots of different ways for the authors. We also keep a companion file on the affiliations, and for the affiliation we keep the name as detailed as we can get it, the DOI of the paper that was published that referenced that institution, the location of them, their full address, and the keywords applied to the article. So we have a semantic profile of the affiliation, or the department, or the lab, or the institute, as well as a semantic profile of the author publishing. And that can be used in lots of different ways, but one of the ways that it's being used, one of the new ways it's being used at the moment is as a marketing file, so that people can say to the University of XYZ, you know, you have published X number of papers with us in the last bit of time. Maybe you want to subscribe to this in addition. In linking the 2 databases, we built a web service to accept files. We auto-disambiguate the incoming articles, and then we automatically review them for new or non-matches, so we ensure accuracy, and then a few of them fall out. I don't think you're giving this paper.
That was last year.
And so this gives you an idea of the match or non-match. And if you look at last year's proceedings, you can find this paper by Bob that describes it in more detail. Inline tagging is where we take the full text of a document and highlight or actually embed in the XML behind the document so that a search system could go directly to the full text of the article, zoom through it, and find where that concept is mentioned. Of course, it's based on the MAI, and so at the same time we do that, we build the MAI output for the automatic indexing. So depending on the organization, they might have 7 or 10 or 20 index terms that MAI generated, and those are the ones that would be shown in the article. So you can set a limit on the number of things that are highlighted in the article. This is also now being used, this technology, to do link data so that we can link out to these concepts, having discovered them by the MAI, and allow definitions from DBPD or something, which I think Bob is going to talk about. Okay. MAI Chem is a patented product that we have for discovery of chemical names based on dictionaries of the full names of the chemical substances, but also differentiated by beginners and enders, very sophisticated names, that can be applied because chemicals, a single substance can be named in many, many ways, and so discovering them is a challenge, and we use the main mechanisms within the MAI concept extractor module, which I described to you earlier, and then discover those names, and it's completely augmentable. So if a firm has a bunch of substances that they're particularly interested in, they can add them to the dictionary. So the dictionaries are editable. Be happy to give you a demo of that. It does link to graphical displays for organic molecules, both through ACD Labs and through one other. And it's pretty cool. We built it originally for patent literature, but it works for all literature. The search presentation layer I talked to you about earlier, it covers using the thesaurus hierarchy itself, the taxonomy view of the thesaurus. You can navigate the structure. This particular case, it's tied to immediacy, which is part of NISM. So you see the full browsable structure here. And you click any one of these and it'll launch a search. You can use the thesaurus per muted index to do type ahead, and so in that case we're including all the preferred and non-preferred terms, and like that. And you can go to the narrower terms or the related terms to expand or narrow the search. So clicking on any one of these will guide the search, and then it shows, in this case, just shows a snippet. This particular application is built on Solar, and Lamine is our resident expert on both Lucene and Solar. So semantic fingerprinting of people, authors, articles, medical records, organizations and affiliations. Use it for pulling up ads and targeting them in the websites, and certainly linking those to an author disambiguation system so we have a clarity of a record as an authority file. So those are a bit more about what we have. For 310, which is our new edition in year 11, we have 310. We have some interface enhancements. We have increased reporting features. We have connections to some visualization options, some automatic term mining options, better integration with search. And some of you who have been here before know that I like to show a stack. I'm not showing the original stack, but this was the stack in 2013, so that was how we were put together. And this is the 2014 stack, so that's last year. And this year, it is changed a little bit. So not so many changes in the modules, except that you see the addition of Ontology Master here. This seems to be ultra sensitive today. And so we are still TCP/IP, we're still Java, we're still XML, we still have admin modules, we still have access to the system, and we can tie it together in lots of ways. So it's getting to be a more mature stack, and so we can start thinking about other items. So the GUI design, which Wynn Hansen has primarily worked on, I'm going to tell you about it, and then Wynn's going to correct me where I'm wrong. So the general idea is that we might have 3 layers of visual depth, kind of a different feel to the way the presentation is put forward. And you haven't seen this yet on the desktop, but I'm anticipating that you will see soon. So we have a neutral layer, the editable field, and then the button layer on the top. So the button is one color, we have this neutral field, and then we have the editable field. And to make it a bit more interesting, we're beveling the edges to give some height and depth and so on. When we chose the original colors for the access for the Data Harmony site, we looked at the aerospace literature, and what pilots found was the most restful on eyes. So we chose these boring colors to be easy on your eyes. So we don't want to change the colors a lot unless the literature has suddenly said that all those reds and yellows and so on are better for people's eyes. But if you're going to spend all day in front of a machine, you kind of want something that's not going to hurt your eyes, and that's what we have in mind here. So we have the blue colors will be for the logos and rounded edges. Every box will be branded a little bit. And this is what the old box looked like here. You're all familiar with that version. And then up here is the new edition. So it's the same back end, same skeleton, but a new look, new skin on the front. So this is what the sys screen will look like for the admin module. Here's some examples of what the color changes will be. So it's not a huge change, except that we have to change it on every single page, and so it takes a little time to get implemented. And then some of the other things we want to do is have, you know how you're not sure if it's really working or not. So we want that to be blinking to give you an idea that yes, indeed, it's actually working, it's thinking, we're working on it. The pieces pop in and out of the box to give you an idea of where it is. And here's a couple of other pages in terms of what they'll look like in the future and what they look like now. So Maestro, and I'm going to talk about Maestro, I'm going to talk about sys, and then I'm going to talk about a couple of additional things that we've added platform-wide. So in Maestro, there's over 25 sort of major changes, and then there's some bug fixes as well. The software is, we feel, very solid, and of course, Jack has now joined us back here in the corner, and his documentation is ready. We did concentrate on extensions this year and reactions to customer requests, so keep them coming, because that's really what's going to drive our development calendar in the next year, with a couple of exceptions that I'll show to you. We do still have a wish list that once 310 is out the door, we will revisit as a group. The toughest group, I have always said, is our internal staff. They are demanding of what we do, although we have a couple of users, notably Rachel and Sharon, who are also driving the process a lot this year, and you'll see the things that they have asked for. Although I have to admit, DuPont did drive some changes as well. So here's one. For those of us with aging eyes, you can now change the font size on the screen. You do it in the admin module, in the login screen. So right now, this one's 12 point, but you can click the drop down and get a whole lot of other sizes. Cosmetic, but helpful. This one is a bit bigger in that, well, for AACR, in particular in the genes thesaurus, but in others like the PLOS, we needed to be able to edit and add characters and rules. So for some really funky descriptions that don't look quite like English, we needed to be able to edit not just the stop word list, but also the word separators and what we call padding characters. So this is in the admin module that you set this. And in the characters that separate words, for example, you might see that, and this is not a perfect example, but if you had geography/history as a keyword, we would say, you got to separate that sucker. Those are two different things. You need to separate them. But in chemical names, gene names, and some other things, particularly related to chemistry, we needed to supply the capability that people could either split it into two words, as this case, or keep that character because it was meaningful to the data. So in this case, we have an automatic split into two words. So when you've got that slash character in here, MAI is going to treat it as two. But if it's not in the list of word separators, then it remains as it is, and you would have to keep that slash in there in order to retrieve it. So the rule would read geography/history, the TTM. And now the slash is allowed in the rule syntax, which it was not in the past. In changing characters that separate the words, when you look at this, I know it's just here at the edge, but you look at this column here, you see a ton of special characters, curly brackets, square brackets, slashes, question marks, all kinds of things that we've always considered high ASCII characters, and we have said that MAI will ignore those. You can't have them in your rule base. But this year we had to cave and say, okay, you can add them, but we're not going to let you just add them willy-nilly, because it's still not best practice to have all those characters in there unless you knowingly wanted them. So here's the list, and it goes on for a bit, and you can add as many of those characters as you want. This gives you the capability to, particularly where you have these characters starting or ending a word, to clean the words and remove the padding characters. So if the list contains, say, a paren, you can include that. So here you see paren/history and paren. And MAI is going to clean it and change it to history. And so when you edit these two lists, you can add the you can add the handling automatically of these special characters. This is not to be confused with the encoding of the special character issues, which is handled differently. And if you have specific questions or you want to see it working, you could talk to Lamine about it. Okay? And then we have this mapping issue where we have multiple classification systems, and sometimes those will have multiple broader terms and sometimes they won't, but if they have multiple broader terms, we need to keep track of those as well. So some notation has been implemented so we can keep track of the mapping and position them properly in the destination as well as the source vocabulary. Are you talking about this one too? Okay, so we have a new option which for the moment is called Smart Thesaurus, and it's a way to take terms from our standard interface, which is here, and link out to places like DBpedia and add that information to the to the record by adding an external URL link. So you can have a heavily networked, heavily linked thesaurus. And Bob's going to give a full talk about this in the near future, and that gets added to your Maestro app in this case. Now, I hesitate to show this to She, but we do have a way to mass delete rules now, and it's a control shift, click on the delete button, and then you mark the ones that you want to delete from a big list. It was an item that we have come forth with caution because it's pretty hard to put those rules back. But if you're deleting a whole branch, for example, and other things, you may well need to use this. And if you've made a mistake in adding things and so on. So it's a good way to get it in there. We do have a cautionary pop-up window that says, are you sure you want to do this before you do it? But you do it, they'll be gone. Okay, we have added some things that'll help all of us in that we often don't know what version of the software somebody's using. And when you're doing customer support, that's a bit frustrating. So we have added a menu that shows up in the About Data Harmony which version you're actually running on your machines. Seems simple, but we didn't have it. We've also added, for those of you that are hosted, an idea of where the host import project name is. So in the header on your display screen, you'll see where you're located. And that makes it easier for us to support you. We added a rules for this term button at the top of the TM pane, record pane, and you can find rules associated with the term. Do you want to see it again? Yeah. Okay, so when automated, a lot of these, but next to the term, you see rules for this term box, and it displays the rules that are available. So it makes it easier in figuring out whether that stuff was there. We've also added an add and drop feature, so you can drag and drop things, moving them around, so watch carefully. You'll see that you can just, instead of having to open the window and move the term, you can just drag and drop it into a new place. Very modern. Do you want to see that one again too? So we select a term, drag it to a new place. Miniature golf is going under golf. And then the change is immediately effective. So now you see the narrower term of miniature golf under golf. In another one, fast click rename. I don't like the name of that term, or it has a typo in it, as in the case of computer technology here. So you clicked on it and it's going to automatically pick up the change term box, and you can fix it. Click OK, and you see the change reflected in the hierarchy. And of course it pops up saying, rule OK? Yeah, you want that rule change. And here's another example. If you want to rename something, you click it. These are slower than I thought. You can lend the piece and it's renamed. So for JSON, we've added a get suggested terms batch JSON API. And for those of you where that's an important thing, this is where we are able to take content as a batch and combine them into a single file and process them using a modified XML known as JSON. And it's a nice little API for people that need to run subsidiary batches. For Thesaurus Master, we've added a check so that people can't just delete a term without making sure that all of the rules using that term are actually changed as well. So if you are deleting one rule and it affects other rules, you can't just delete that. You need to fix all the rules that are affected before you can make the change. So there's a pop-up box that says, do you want to check the rule or delete it? And you can't, until you've proceeded through that process, you can't just delete it. So it's a safety check for the system. We are also checking to make sure that all the related terms are valid before exporting, so that you can export part or all, but your related terms need to go with it. And you, of course, you can select to move related terms or not, but if you select to move them, we want to make sure that they're all valid for the terms that you are exporting. And we've also improved the exports and the logs for MAI batch, which you'll see a little bit more of in a minute. We've added a notes field to the rules export. This was not available in the export before, and now you can export your notes along with the rules. So if you've made a note to yourself in the rule base, that'll export with it if you want it. Instead of saying no top terms, we've changed the error message to say either loss of connection to the server, if that was the problem, or your session has expired, please log in again, so that you have a better idea of why the thing isn't working. You don't have to keep pounding the keyboard to see what happened. We are also able to auto-suggest some rules to you. So you look at your rule base, and then where you're already in it and the syntax is there and you've typed with 1,000 times, now you'll be able to have some auto help, and I'll show that one to you again as well. So you saw a drop-down list of the commands. You type in your term, and here when you typed a cap, it gave you another one to choose from. So it's a drop-down list of all those things that you might want to type in, all the valid syntax, so it speeds the process. And now we have the ability to save a rule after the rule check immediately. So it says, rule okay, would you like to save it? Yes, please, and you click it. I think I have a slide about this, but you may also notice our cool new colors. So lots of color now in the rule scheme, just to make it stand out. So the green is the stuff you've been typing, and the rest of it is all syntax. The rule builder now specifically allows you to increase the length of a rule up to 100,000 characters. We had that's a very long rule, but for this medical claims compliance, we have some rules that just barely push this edge. So it's I don't recommend it for everybody. I like ones that are simpler, but for medical conditions, we found that it had to be incredibly long. Oh, here it is. We've added colors to the rule editor. So here you see it in the original black and white, but when you click the button, you can change it to colors. So it comes in black and white, and I'll play this again. And you click the colors button. Put your back up there. And it changes to the color option. So you can have it either way. You can have it with or without colors, depending on your mood for the day. We've also added font and style options. So here you see it clicking through to give you different fonts, and we did limit the number of fonts. The first one came with, I don't know, the bazillion that Word has and other things, but we decided we didn't need that many. And so there you go. You click over there for plain or what kind of character set you want, and then You can go to black and white or color, so you can do a lot of playing with the rule base when you're feeling a little tired having edited all day. We have also added a way for you to save user settings and preferences. So once you've set up your screen in the color and size that you want, with the type font that's easiest for you, then you can save it. And next time you log on, it'll be there again. In Test MAI, we have added highlighting like we have in inline tagging, so you can see what terms have triggered a rule. And if you don't want to have the highlight turned on, you just press Control L and it gets rid of the highlighting. We've also added a search box to Test MAI because some people are inserting really long strings into Test MAI. And so if you want to look for a particular term in the text, the source text that you're running against, you can search using the search box. We've modified the find function so that you can focus the query on just some part of the rule instead of the whole rule. So it's a better find function for you to use throughout the rule building process. Help labels have also been changed. So we've updated and expanded the in-map help. It's not quite 100% against the documentation because that was just finished, but we will be putting in a lot more information in the help boxes, and you can see that there's now color, but also a lot more information in the help than was there before. We do have some new APIs. I mentioned the get suggested terms batch for JSON. You can get the get suggested terms batch XML, and we've done actually a lot of custom APIs this year to different software systems. We added a progress bar to the import module because those of you that have had to import know that you're going, is this working or not? And how far along is it? And so now there's a little bar that tells you how far it's gotten. And if you lose your connection, that connection box will pop up and say you lost your connection or whatever. So this will give you an idea of how you're doing on the import. Some kind of miscellaneous changes that are either enhancements or bug fixes, which are only important to a few of you, so I thought I'd just go through them quickly. Where change term was not working properly, when the change is selected after a search, so it was a funny time for it not to work, has been fixed. There were some inconsistencies in how the single quotes and case were used in rule bodies, and so those have been unified. We allowed deleting rules with a big text to match. So previously, if it was really a big text to match, we went, I don't know. We put a lot of work into this. I don't think you ought to be able to just delete it. But then we found some that were a bit erroneous, and so we did delete them. We've added a way for XML imports to be added to the Start DH in the JDOM application. And of course, the session expired. I already mentioned that, where your session is expired and you didn't know it. We've now added a little script to say your session's expired, please log in again. We added a check on the null pointer exception error so that people could, if it was a null pointer exception, you now know what kind of a null pointer exception it was. We have highlighting of singulars and plurals in inline tagging, so you can get either one. And the leading spaces, people often put a leading space in when they enter something into the search box, and then they don't get any results, and they don't know why. So now if there's a leading space in the search box, we remove it for you so that you can implement your search. It's just I think it's a typing thing, but they were often there, or you copied and the space was there. We also removed the right click from the record pane because it didn't seem appropriate there. There is now a wildcard allowed when the all field is selected. Before you couldn't select when you were selecting all. The JSON output was for some reason not processing the first record in a batch. Go figure. But it does now. The export branch now checks for validity of an entered term in a search request, so you can find those terms. And we have updated the OWL2 and the SCOS exports because those standards changed, and so we needed to update the exports. The notation feature had some funky things happening in the building of the notation, particularly in alphanumerics. And so for those of you that use notation to force a sort in your system, that has now been rectified. And for some reason we had occasions when a duplicate ID was being assigned to individual terms. And so in order to get rid of that, usually at project creation, we needed to make sure to verify that there weren't any duplicate IDs coming in. That Rev 597, that is the way we keep track of the addition of the software. So although it's version 3.10 is what you will know it as, the addition that's actually released onto people's desktop and saved in the SVN is a different number. And Mary, what number revision are we on now?
689.
689?
Yes.
Okay. So what you will be getting installed on your system, if you elect to take 310, is 689 or better. So it's and so that gives you an idea of how many increments we've done to the software. We did have a problem taking people's Word docs and loading them to the new MAI batch, and so that's no longer a problem. Word has a life of its own, I think. And we had a similar challenge with PDF loading in MAI batch, and now PDFs of all stripes, fingers crossed, will load and be indexed by MAI batch. So we weren't having trouble loading them to MAI one by one, but for some reason they weren't processing in batch. And for people that are doing big back files, it's important to be able to process all that stuff. And the import module was working fine until we added some new features to it, and then it was broken, so we had to fix it again. So that gives you kind of a general overview. There are a few people that are in single user edition, and we go back and forth about whether we'll abandon single user or not, but we decided that for now we should make the single user, or what we also call the desktop edition, reflect all the features of the main software package. So for those of you that are single user users that use the desktop edition, that's why we call it desktop edition, you will also get all the features with this version 310 that everybody else gets. So batch GUI. We have been able to process big batches of data since the beginning of MAI, but now we decided that we should make a nice user-friendly graphical user interface so that all users could process batches all by themselves, and we wouldn't need to always process them for them. So now when you go to the admin module, and you will notice that there is a new line called the Open MAI Batch app, and when you go there, you set it up, same as you set up all of your other applications. And you can process most kinds of data. At least you can process these types of data through MAI batch. So you can select your batch, set it up, and run it yourself. When you look at your list of files, you might decide that you don't want to process all of them. You might want to only process some of them. So you go to wherever your selecting your batch from, and you might select one-on-one, you might select a set of files, or you might select everything that's in that particular listing. In order to get a batch of data processed with custom tags on it, we might want to say what those custom tags are in source XML data before we process it through the batch processing. So here is where you would say what the XML tag is from the source data, and then any particular things you want to be able to do with it. So in MAI batch, you've got import, export, and settings, and here setting of XML tags, so that you can define what those tags will be so that they're captured in the way that you want them captured and processed through MAI. You might also want to see what you did after you've processed the batch. So to take a sample, you're going to go to this screen of the reviewing the results, select the input file, and then you can go through and see how MAI processed that particular batch. And the records are usually separated by a line of asterisks. Okay, so throughout all of our system, we log everything that happens. That's one of the side effects of being TCP/IP. And in logging the process in the statistics module that a lot of you are familiar with, we have got the source data, we have the human editors, we look at the hit, miss, and noise statistics. This is not new to many of you. To some it will be new. And we can compare the data. We look at those statistics. DH Monitor is a new module this year. This is one that you can use, or we can use, to see whether your project is up and running or not. So if we say, somebody rings up and says, I don't think it's processing my data, then we go to the DH Monitor and look at the projects and see whether they're running or not. You can also have access to this monitor, check your own projects and see whether they're running. And what you see over here is the port name, the project names, and who's running what. So each of you that are hosted get your own port number, because we don't want to mix people's data up. And so we have a lot of different ports. You're only allowed to see your own ports. But we can quickly check and see if there's a green light, meaning it's on, or a red light, meaning it's stopped. So that's been really helpful to us. So it runs in a browser window, and the updates are real time, so you know that it's current. Of course, it supports multiple hosts. In our case, in your case, it's generally going to be one port. And of course, we want to be able to add and remove projects from the view, so that by password we know who can look at what. Let's see. In exporting from MAI batch, I don't know why I didn't have all these together. We looked at settings so we could do the XML. You can save to an output file, or you can save to a log spreadsheet, so you can keep track of the results. So if you want to look at them in a CSV option or in Excel, you can do that. And then you can quickly review the results. We do this a lot to figure out how accurate the indexing is in test batches. So Ontology Master is not quite releasable. It's close, but it's not being released today. So let me show you. This is a sneak peek of what it looks like. It is built on the Source Master core. A lot of what we needed was already there, and we were already exporting full OWL records. So knowing that we could do it and that they were well-formed XML, we decided to make another product because in an ontology, you need to have a directional relationship. So we wanted to have one-way streets. Everything we have in the source master is always reciprocal. Reciprocal posting is incredibly important to a well-formed thesaurus, but in an ontology, there's a lot of directionality. So we wanted to build a project where we could say, this is the direction or that's the direction. It still has the same functionality as the source master because that's been pretty well honed over time, but it has its own administrative module. You're going to define by field, you want to define the relationship, and in this case it's a sibling relationship, and you define the relationships of the fields to each other. So here we have a brother-sister relationship, for example. We can define the broader fields, so getting the directionality. So in this case, it's eating is eaten by, has a narrower field eating, and is part of has a narrower one called has part. So we're defining the brother-sister relationships there, and then we can give the relationships in the full record. So this term X2 either has a part or is part of something else. You'll kind of recognize the screen in general, but we see that we can have different kinds of relationships, and all these, although we are defining a set of about 12 relationships to start with, the ones that are listed in the standard as defaults, people will want to add their own, and they can add as many as they want to. We don't care. It's the same as you've always been able in the admin module to rename your fields or add additional fields, except for the hierarchical fields in the source master. So you could have as many additional equivalence fields or notes fields or associated fields as you wanted to, but the hierarchical fields, with the exception of notation, we didn't let you add additional ones. So one of the big changes in Ontology Master is now you can define multiple hierarchies. The other big change is that you can define directionality in relationships. So for us, those are fairly big changes in the software. And here you see a little closer up what's happening. So we have the different kinds of broader term relationships. And I'm not sure when this is going to be released because we thought we had a full specification, and then as we began developing, we realized we needed to revisit the specs. So it's not out yet. Okay, SIS has undergone a lot of work this year. One of the things we're doing with it is keeping track of our customer relationship management in-house, which has been an interesting change. We tried Intellium, we tried Salesforce, we tried Sugar, we tried a bunch of stuff, and it didn't work. So we thought we'd eat our own cooking and use SIS. I think Charlotte's going to talk tomorrow a little bit about the SIS implementation for ASCE. So a lot of changes this year, and 14 sort of big ones. This is, if you've never seen it, an example of the SIS edit screen. And creation of SIS is driven strictly by the schema. So you build a DTD, you build it in the order you want the fields to appear, and if you don't like that field where it is and you want to move it up, then you have to change the schema and rebuild the project. And it's a fairly fast process then to rebuild the schema and rebuild the data, but it does mean that you have to pay particular attention to the schema. One of the things we added was a URL field. So now we have URL fields as data fields in both Maestro and in SIS. They are increasingly referenced by data collections, so we wanted to keep track of them here. We have a Boolean indexing, and therefore we need to check the Boolean indexing and building the indexes for search within SIS. We added the SIS DTD to the source files that you can select from in the administrative module in building a SIS app. We have made some export and log changes to the MAI batch that can be run from SIS. So if you want to batch index everything in a SIS app, some changes to make that a more straightforward process have happened. And there was a, well, I mentioned this all field before in the wildcard bug that's been revisited and fixed. We've also added field filtering based on field values within SIS, so you can make choose a combination of fields and then make a search selection based on your own filters. So I want 1, 2, 3, and 7, and I don't want the other stuff, and you can filter by that in your search. Another change that we made was to allow multiple thesauri to be accessed from SIS. So you'll notice each of these has their own MAI button. So, and in this mock-up it says the source descriptors is the source descriptors. But say you had a geographic file and a list of people names and the conceptual thesaurus and whatever else you wanted. One customer has 11 of these files that they want to be able to populate within a SIS record. And so calling multiple thesauri from the application is now allowable within the SIS schema. That says the same thing, but this is how you do it. So in the intro frame, we have TM projects, and here you can configure. So this is the SIS intro frame, not the Maestro one that most of you are used to. And in the TM projects, it says configure, and over here it gives a list of the thesauri that are available on that port. You choose the ones you want, and then start them up. So starting the projects is something you're familiar with. It happens in this screen now. We've added a new search backend to SIS. So Alex is now also expert in adding Lucene. And within that search, which is now more powerful, we also have the ability to do what we call a recursive search, where you do a search and you've got 200 records and you want to filter it or narrow that search down. You like those records, but you just want to refine them a bit more. You can do that second search within the search cluster that you've already got. So that's a search within a search or a recursive search. We've also added wildcard search to the SIS search box, so now you can put an asterisk at the end of your term or internal to the term, like in an organization or something, and you're able to execute the search within SIS. There's also the capability to add and remove parameters from the search window, and you do that over here. So you want to add a parameter or remove a parameter. In the past, we just had the ability to do these check boxes, and you check and uncheck those, but now you can remove these parameters as well. So it's another way of doing kind of a recursive search or filtering your search if you have one that already exists. When you get the search results from SIS, you might want to have different displays. In this case, this is the search sorting. So here are your results, and here's information about them. So depending on what kind of information you're acquiring, say it was, I'm going to Washington, D.C., and I want to know all the customers and leads that are in the Washington, D.C. area. I could use that as a way to pull the data and then display it in a sorted export, so I could think about who I might want to visit. We took out a little pop-up window that was just annoying, saying, searching, indexing, indexing. Get rid of it. We don't need it. And we removed editing from the search table skills cells because it wasn't necessary. It was confusing and you could do it elsewhere. We also added the ability to handle different data types in SysSearch, so you don't have to search for a single data type at a time. You can search for all the data types within the file at one time. And in doing that, we needed to add extra parameters to the SysSearch form. So the form you saw a few slides ago where you're looking at all the parameters, we wanted to be able to give you lots of options in that search. And you just saw the table and sorting function for the search results. And there were a bunch of, once you start hammering on a project a bit more, you find other things that you didn't really want, but we fixed the bugs that we found. So those kind of a quick blitz through everything that's happened this year. They are mostly bigger things. We are looking ahead to Data Harmony 3.11 because we'll put this one to bed and then we need a new one. And one of the things we're looking at is platform integration so that we have an increasing number of partners. We've always been middleware. It's a frustrating place to be when you're selling something. So what we'd like to do is integrate with a lot of platforms. I told you we have EJ Press, we have Really Strategies, we have our software, we integrate with a lot of different content management systems, and then we, like MarkLogic, and then we send out the data to some publishing platform like Publishing Technologies or Adapon. And using those partners, so we want to extend that partner network, we want to be able to say, we plug in all these places. So here's your author submission. You can use Aries or EJ Press or something else or something homegrown, and we plug into that. So here's the pieces we offer to support that place. So there's indexing of the articles as they're submitted. There's an author disambiguation file. There's profiling authors for peer review and so on. So that chunk goes in there, and then there's the content management system, which might link to SYS for metadata creation and tracking as things move forward, keeping track of those pieces. We're looking at a partnership with Xstyles so you could edit and put stuff back in again. We have, so all the way across the platform, wherever it is, we'd like to say, here's your main hunks, and here's where Data Harmony can integrate across all of that. So we want to be a support platform across the entire publishing cycle. We've particularly with AIP, we've made great strides in that direction, and we have increasingly with others of you here in the audience, like DuPont, been able to do that integration, but we'd like to make it a bit more formal. So that'll take a fair amount of our time this year, but it's, I think, an important next step for us. We are also going to heavily pursue linked data options. It's whereas, as many of you know, I wasn't too crazy about the semantic web. I didn't think it was implementable. I do think that linked data is a good way to go and very implementable. So underlined with a semantic approach, in our case, that's kind of our hobby horse, we are going to be very heavily behind linked data activities. And as you see the Smart Thesaurus, you'll see how that stuff will be working in the coming year. We will, of course, finish Ontology Master. You've seen it. We'll be looking for some early implementers who want to try it out. So if any of you want to get your hands on it, we'd be happy to let you try it out, and it'll be available until we actually have a full release to anybody who wants to try it. And then we'll look for some people who want to get us over that initial hump. And then because so many of our customers have moved to a hosting environment, we will continue to updrive, enhance the hosting experience. So things like being able to monitor your system online and so on, so that you know, and you don't have to call Mary to get it running, but rather could maybe do that yourself will be a significant improvement to the system.